Oh, I'm already live. Sorry. I might have to edit that on YouTube in a little while. But hello, welcome to Family Tech Talk Live. I do this every Tuesday or break down some of the news that's happening in technology. And this week, a lot is happening in technology. So basically, Facebook. I asked in my Instagram stories if you wanted me to talk about all the stuff that's going on in Facebook, or you wanted me to talk about Childhood 2.0, which is what I was originally talking about. But the votes were tipped in the favor of all of the Facebook news. So we are going to go ahead and do that instead. First, let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is the outage that happened last week. So, a lot of people are thinking, oh, it's really convenient that this outage happened when they're facing a lot of scrutiny, a lot of fire because of the all of the rest of the stuff that we're going to talk about today. But really, the outage happened because of a configuration change. And what happened, so I'm going to break it down in kind of layman's terms a little bit. The DNS service is called the domain name service, and it's basically the address book for the internet. And it will translate a URL like facebook.com and everything like that into different situations. Anyway, into different, Facebook translates into this IP address. And so it sends the traffic there. It gets all of the data from those servers. So basically what happened was a configuration change that caused it all to kind of go offline. So what it says, like once the data centers were offline, servers that used the domain name system or DNS to direct internet traffic pulled themselves off the internet, and it made it impossible basically to find Facebook services. So without that connection, it was impossible for the rest of the internet to find our servers. So the DNS changes also disabled internal tools, which would have allowed Facebook engineers to restore services remotely, forcing the engineering staff to drive to the data centers and restart the systems there. Now, as an IT professional, I totally get it. I always say you can fix anything remotely short of internet and hardware problems. So if you make a configuration change that basically locks you out, so if I'm trying to make a configuration change and the address to get to the configuration change is giving me wrong directions, I can't make that configuration change remotely. So I'm going to have to go to the servers and do it there manually. So that is what took so long to bring it back up. They had to go to the data centers and undo what they did on the servers directly. So that is what happened. Wasn't malicious. That just happens sometimes. It reminded me of when AWS, so AWS is Amazon Web Service, and it hosts a whole bunch of internet services like Slack and Netflix and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of people have their servers on AWS. And so there was a same kind of thing. This was back in 2017. Same kind of thing. Configuration change. It was literally just like one dot or one like character out of place in the code, brought everything down, rebooted everything, and it took like a good portion of the internet down. And I totally remember that back in 2017. I was working in IT, and suddenly we're getting floods of calls that like nothing is working. That's like basically the day the internet died, and it was again same kind of thing. Configuration change brings everything down. So that is what happened with Facebook last week. And because Facebook is the parent company of Instagram and WhatsApp, it brought everything down there as well. Rumors were also that their key cards to get into Facebook buildings were also down because they also use this internet service, they use the services that have to deal with Facebook.com. Anyway, so that's what happened last week. Having said all that, if you have any questions about it, feel free to let me know in the chat or, either on YouTube. Like I said, I always go live on YouTube and on Instagram at the same time, every Tuesday at noon Mountain Standard Time. So it's noon Mountain Standard Time. So here I am. But let's dig into what you really, really wanted to talk about. So the first thing is, let's talk about what was said. This whistleblower, her name is Frances Haugen, and I may be pronouncing that wrong. But she testified to Senate Commerce Subcommittee on Consumer Protection. That's a big old mouthful. And basically condemning Facebook for all of these things. So, what exactly did she say? This is what I want, because a lot of people do like sensationalized headlines, and I want to let you know exactly what was said and kind of rebuttals to it. So, she is a 37-year-old data expert from Iowa with a degree in computer engineering and a master's degree in business from Harvard. Um, and the joke with Harvard is that if you went to Harvard, you have to say you went to Harvard. So clearly, this was important because from Harvard. Prior to being recruited by Facebook, she worked for 15 years at 10 companies, including Google, Pinterest, and Yelp. So what she says: Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy. These are kind of the three things that she's really calling them out on. The company's leadership knows how to make Facebook and Instagram safer, but won't make the necessary changes because they have put their astronomical profits before people. She says congressional action is needed, and they won't solve this crisis without government intervention, is what she claims. So, Zuckerberg responded. He says, at the most basic level, I think most of us don't recognize the false picture of the company that is being painted. Zuckerberg, however, did appear to agree with Haugen on the need for updated internet regulations, which I also agree with. Updated internet regulations is needed, saying that would relieve private companies from having to make decisions on social issues on their own, which I totally agree with. And again, I don't know what I don't know the solution to this, but it's a global company, so there can't just be US regulations. They need, would need to follow regulations for all sorts of different countries because it is a global organization. So, US regulations, I don't know. I don't know how much power we want to put in the government's hands, but I do agree. Like, so COPA, I've talked about this a couple times. The Children's Online Privacy and Protection Act is out of date for sure. It was created long before most of these internet platforms were a thing. And so, what it kind of gives tech companies, not really the rights to do, but what it kind of forces tech companies to do is, so say you're a parent and you have your child on Google Family Link, or you're setting up parental controls for an Apple device at the age of 13, which is the age that this COPA restrictions kind of came up with. At the age of 13, children can opt out of those protections because they're over 13. And I'm not sure that 13 is really the right age to be able to opt out. In our family, we have conversations, so it's not going to be, I'm not concerned that my kids are going to remove themselves from protections. If they do, they know the fallout from that would be to lose their devices. So it's not going to be a big deal. But for other parents who have a little bit more rebellious kids, they may need some stronger protections, and allowing their kids the ability to opt out is just not working for their family. So let's go back into what Haugen was saying. So Haugen, and this is the Facebook whistleblower. Haugen suggested, for example, that the minimum age for Facebook's popular Instagram photo sharing platform could be increased from the current 13 to 16 or 18. And I kind of made a note to myself on here. I'm like, with 10-year-olds currently on the platform, do we really think an age restriction is going to help? I don't think so because, again, the minimum age for Instagram currently is 13. I cannot even count how many kids under the age of 13 have an Instagram account. So that the current rule is not even being followed. So if we raise that rule, it's still just not going to be followed. Um, she also acknowledged the limitations of possible remedies. Facebook, like other social media companies, uses algorithms to rank and recommend content to feeds users' news feeds. When the ranking is based on engagement, likes, shares, and comments, as it is now with Facebook, users can be vulnerable to manipulation and misinformation. Haugen would prefer the ranking to be chronological, and I'm going to get really into this whole chronological thing. But she testified people will choose the more addictive option, even if it's leading their daughters to eating disorders. That was a direct quote from her. That people will choose the more addictive option, even if it is leading to their daughters eating disorders. I thought that was an interesting point because if I see, um, maybe we'll get into it a little bit later when we're talking about chronological, but um, I would love the ability to choose. I want to choose if I see my Facebook feed in chronological order or I see my Instagram feed in chronological order. I think that would be very, very helpful. Um, but I could toggle it back and forth if I want to see that or not. If the the problem with this is what she's saying is that people will still choose the more addictive feed rather than the chronological feed, and I'd be curious to see if that is actually the case. Um, I know eh, because it's overwhelming. So I always kind of liken this to Twitter. So when Twitter first came out, there's a whole bunch of information and you're following all these things and the Twitter feed goes so fast and you're gonna miss so much stuff because there is so much stuff. So if you're always seeing chronological, you're not seeing everything because it's too much to show. So I think that's the big problem with chronological is that we're following too many people. We are friends with too many people. So that's going to present a problem when like you'd be just scrolling. I think you might even end up scrolling longer and not seeing stuff that you want to see um, if you have a chronological order. So continuing on, after the November election, Facebook in, dissolved the Civic Integrity Unit where Haugen had been working. That was the moment, she said, when she realized that I don't trust that they're willing to actually invest what needs to be invested to keep Facebook from being dangerous. Um, and I think that is a little false because they I feel like they are doing a lot to combat misinformation and things like that. Anything that if you post that says COVID on it, there's definitely like a link to like COVID resources. So I think they are trying to combat that, and they've also rolled out, um, if the URL that you're visiting, you can click the information for the URL. So say you see something in your feed and there's a little information button, you can get more information on what that domain is about, and whether or not it's a reputable source. So, I mean, I think they're doing a lot to combat misinformation, at least. Um, so Facebook maintains that Haugen's allegations are misleading and insists there's no evidence to support the premise that it is the primary cause of social polarization. Today, a Senate Commerce Subcommittee held a hearing with a former product manager at Facebook who worked for the company for less than 2 years. This is a response from Facebook. Um, who worked for the company for less than 2 years, had no direct reports, never attended a decision point meeting with top executives, and testified more than 6 times to not working on the subject matter in question. So her area at Facebook had nothing to do with what she's talking about. We don't agree with her characterization of the many issues she's testified about, the company said in a statement. And I know I broke down a lot of the whole, is Instagram toxic for teens and all of that. So if you haven't watched those videos, definitely check them out. Again, either YouTube or in my IGTV. Um, so here is a response. So Mark Zuckerberg took to Facebook um, and wrote a whole big long post about all of this. So he started out with the service outage, and apologized for it. That people rely on Facebook services and feel like you let them down and everything like that. So um, I applaud him for facing that head on. um, so then he starts talking about what's happening with this whistleblower. He says many of the claims, and this kind of echoes what the official response from the company was. Many of the claims don't make any sense. If we wanted to ignore research, why would we create industry leading research program to understand these important issues in the first place? If we didn't care about fighting harmful content, then why would we employ so many more people dedicated to this than any other company in our space, even ones larger than us? If we wanted to hide our results, why would we have established an industry leading standard for transparency and reporting on what we're doing? And if social media were as responsible for polarizing society as some people claim, then why are we seeing polarization increase in the US while it stays flat or declines in many countries with just as heavy use of social media around the world? So that's a super interesting point, that the polarization is really happening here in the United States. It's not happening in other countries where social media is still just as prevalent. So it's a very interesting point on that. If it's the platform that's the problem, and I am of the mind of technology being mostly agnostic, you can choose to use the platform or not. That's not, um, like, no one's forcing you to use the platform. So blaming the technology for something, I always talk about, like, I'm not going to blame the car when I get in a car crash unless like my brakes fail or something. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to blame the driver for the car crash. So it's users' responsibility to use these platforms the way they're intended, and not crash the car. So back to Mark Zuckerberg's uh, statement. When we introduced the meaningful social interactions change to newsfeed, this change showed fewer viral videos and more content from friends and family. And I can totally see that in my own Facebook browsing. When I interact more with a particular group, like I am a member of several Facebook groups, when I interact more with a particular group, I see more of that group's content in my regular feed. So as I interact, so if I have ulcerative colitis, so if I'm going through a flare, then I'll be on the ulcerative colitis group a lot more. And as I'm scrolling through those posts, or scrolling through my regular feed, I see a lot from the ulcerative colitis group. And then like my flare goes away, I don't interact as much, and then other groups start taking over. So I can definitely see how it's not just what is getting liked the most, it's what I'm interacting with the most, is what is being shown to me. So he says, which we did knowing it would mean people spent less time on Facebook, but that research suggested it was the right thing for people's well being. Is that something a company focused on profits over people would do? Um, and so then he's talking about how young people use technology. He says, think about how many school age kids have phones. Rather than ignoring this, technology companies should build experiences that meet their needs while also keeping them safe. And I could not agree with this more. Um, we're deeply committed to doing industry leading work in this area. A good example of this is Messenger Kids, which I totally agree with. Messenger Kids is a great platform, um, which is widely recognized as better and safe than alternatives. We've also worked on bringing this kind of age appropriate experience with parental controls for Instagram too. And they've gotten a lot of heat about this Instagram Kids. But let's get into that. But given all the questions about whether this would actually be better for kids, we've paused that project to take more time to engage with experts and make sure anything we do would be helpful. So, excuse me. Pardon me. Um, so what he's saying is that he's getting a lot of flack for Instagram kids. And I think that is falsely placed because, like we saw with Messenger kids, it is a much better platform for kids than just allowing them access to actual Facebook Messenger. You can lock it down, you have parental controls. There's all sorts of things that help keep it safe for kids. So I don't know why we're pushing back against a platform that could make it safer for kids when kids are already joining Instagram. Um, and I would rather them have a more protected space that they can, graduate to regular Instagram after they've learned how to use it in this more protected space. So, I'm kind of on board with Instagram kids, but um, will we could agree to disagree on that one. Um, so back to Mark Zuckerberg's comments here. It says, we're committed to doing the best we can, but at some level, the right body to assess trade-offs between social equities is our democratically, and I totally butchered that word, um, elected Congress. For example, what is the right age for teens to be able to use internet services? How should internet services verify people's ages? Exactly. And how should companies balance if we're going to have an informed conversation about the effects, or how should companies balance teens' privacy while giving parents visibility into their activity? If we're going to have an informed conversation about the effects of social media on young people, it's important to start with a full picture. We're committed to doing more research ourselves and making more research publicly available. And then last little quote from his is that said, I'm worried about the incentives that are being set here. We have an industry leading research program so that we can identify important issues and work on them. It's disheartening to see that work taken out of context and used to construct a false narrative that we don't care. If we attack organizations making an effort to study their impact on the world, we're effectively sending the message that it's safer not to look at all in case you find something that could be held against you. Um, and that's a huge point because, they're doing this research, they're figuring out what the problems are. And I feel like they are doing things to fix the problems. Whether it's the right things is to be determined, to be decided, but they're at least doing things. And I don't think they're just, they get this research like, oh well, Instagram is toxic for teens. Well, we'll just keep going doing what we're doing. I really don't think that's happening at all. And as evidenced, like I said in the video I was talking about, with Instagram being toxic for teens, they are doing things. They said that, the teens are saying that like counts are making them feel bad. Okay, so they hide like counts. Okay, well, that didn't help. They are trying to do things. They're getting feedback and they're saying, okay, yeah, we can do this. And it's not helping because it's not the technology that's doing it, it's the people using and managing the technology that is causing the problems. Um, so this is a different article, more just about the whistleblower situation. So this is from the Associated Press. Um, Facebook, in the aftermath of the testimony that its platforms harm children, will be introducing several features, including prompting teens to take a break using its photo sharing app, Instagram, and nudging teens if they are repeatedly looking at the same content that is not conducive to their well being. So, this was something that just came out this week. Happened, after the whistleblower stuff. They're saying, okay, these are some of the initiatives that we are doing to try and combat this stuff that we've already been working on. Again, not fair to say that they're not doing anything about it and they're just prioritizing profits because it's clear they do have things in the works. I don't think this is going to help. And here's why. So there's two things that it's saying that it's going to do. It's going to prompt you to take a break. So you probably get like a notification on your screen. Hey, maybe it's time to take a break. Well, you know what happens whenever every time Netflix tells me to do that? I say, "Stop judging me, Netflix," and I continue. So it's not I really don't think that's going to do anything to help any of this. So, like, a prompt to say, "Hey, I think you've been on Instagram a little too long." I'll be like, "Stop judging me, Instagram. Continue." Um, just like I do with Netflix. So, I don't think that's gonna be helpful. Nudging teens if they're repeatedly looking at the same content. I feel like they know that they're looking at the same content, and telling them, "Hey, you know what? Like, looking at these ones probably isn't the best thing for your health." Like, I feel like they know that. They feel themselves, like, feeling bad about themselves, yet they, like, can't stop looking. Like, that's what we talked about again um in one of my other 2 lives, um, where they can't help themselves. They're like, "Okay, well, yeah, I'm feeling bad about myself, but I still want to look at it." So what you need is so this next sentence is what was encouraging to me. The Menlo Park, California based Facebook is also planning to introduce new controls for adults of teens on an optional basis so that parents or guardians can supervise what their teens are doing online. This is the one that's actually going to help. These initiatives come after Facebook announced late last month that it was pausing work on Instagram for kids, but critics say the plan lacks details and they're skeptical that the new features would be effective. Like I said, I don't think the first two features would be effective at all, but I think if it's similar to the way TikTok works, where I have my teens account underneath my own account and I can set up different time limits, I can set up whether they can search or who can contact them and all of those things, and I can set up kind of like a safe search for them. I think that would be way more helpful and limit their ability to log out of that protected account, and make sure they have to stay on that protected account. I think that is what would actually make a difference. That would help, because as I mentioned in the other live, a teen that's spending hours and hours a day on Instagram and then feeling bad about themselves, that's, more of a parenting problem. Parent needs to step in and be like, "Hey, you've been on Instagram for too long today. It's time to turn it off." So, I think that that's where it can actually be helpful. So then there's this New York Times article, about how to fix Facebook. And it kind of goes over what Haugen had mentioned, but but we'll go into a little more details on this one. So Haugen suggested essentially turning off computer algorithms and making more of the internet gravitate toward designs like those of iMessage or past versions of Facebook and Instagram that showed posts in chronological order. So the problem, like I was mentioning with chronological order, is that we like too much stuff. So I'm a member of all these different groups, and I am, Facebook friends with all these different people, and it's harder to see what I really want to see in all of that noise. And yes, I can unfollow this and I can unfollow that. But like, oh, but what if they post something that I want to see? So, having a separate feed, and I know Instagram has this too, where you can put close friends, but maybe a separate section where it's just the chronological feed and it's just your friends, that you've selected, or just the companies. You have to add family tech to that. I'm totally kidding. But just all of those things that you truly, truly want to see no matter what they post. I want to see that, I have, these best friends, and I want to see anytime they post. And that feed can be chronological. And then I can have, my groups feed, and I can have, a news feed with just, companies. So originally, when Facebook moved from chronological to, what it is now, um, I had two different kind of setups. I remember I made a whole group of just all of the companies that I liked, like the pages that I liked, so that I could go into that feed and just see the companies that I liked and see what updates they had. And then I can toggle it back and just see all of my personal contacts and see, what they were up to. And I think that would, being able to kind of separate the feed into those sections where I'm just seeing friends and it's in chronological order, and then I'm just seeing companies and it's in chronological order, and then everything else, But so what Haugen said though is most people will actually not choose to look at that. They'll choose the more addictive stuff that I actually want to see based on what I've interacted with. So I'd be curious what you guys think about chronological versus what you're seeing now. Do you think that you would actually enjoy seeing a chronological order, or would you like to have a choice to toggle it back and forth? Um, I would just be curious about how much it would get used for sure. So definitely leave a comment. Let me know what you would think about chronological. I mean, not that I have any say because I have no contacts at Facebook. I know nothing. So I have no say in the game. Haugen and others have recommended changing US law to hold Facebook responsible for real world harms. And that's kind of the crux of like what she was getting at, including terrorist acts resulting from posts that the company's computer systems distributed to people's feeds. And I think that sets just a huge precedence that I don't know we want to cross that line of holding a tech company responsible for the choices of somebody based on a post that they saw. Um and they can put, like we get into freedom of speech. And because we're in the US, we hold a lot of weight to that freedom of speech. But again, a US based company can't be held to laws of other countries, or like if they try and tailor their product to all the laws of all the different countries, it's going to be a huge mess because this law is going to conflict with this law and this law and this law and this law. So I think what they're doing, notifying you, hey, this could be misinformation, this might not be from a good news source, I think is helpful for sure. But I don't know that holding them responsible for real world harms is valid because we're taking away so much personal responsibility. And I think that is and I've talked about this in both of the lives that I talked about that have to do with this stuff is we're getting away from personal responsibility where, you know, okay, I'm blaming you and I blame you and I blame this for my choices. And that's not fair because my choices are my own. And if I'm giving that much power to other people and companies, then that makes me powerless, and that's a terrible place to be. So holding them responsible for something that I'm doing in the real world. So it's like, I have a good one. So I go to the bar and I get drunk, and then I drive and I kill somebody. Is it the alcohol's fault that I did that? So would I have the right to sue or hold, you know, Jack Daniels responsible for my choice of getting in a car and killing somebody? That would be the same kind of thing where I am holding the company that makes the alcohol responsible for the choice that I made to use that inappropriately. Um, so I think we get into a really dangerous situation when we want to have the government reach into these private companies and do something. Like I mentioned, though, I am not against having more regulation on the internet as a whole. With getting rid of COPA, making the age of opt out maybe a little bit older, things like that. I'm okay with those kinds of things. But holding a tech company responsible for a choice that somebody makes in the real world, I think is what getting into very, very dangerous territory and huge government overreach. Um, so I did want to break down this article that came out. So after I talked about the Instagram is toxic for teens, a lot of the stuff that I said, I mean, granted, she didn't watch my live, so I'm not saying that she took any of this from me. But a lot of that stuff that I was talking about came out in this article is by Julie Jargon on the Wall Street Journal. And it's parents, here are teen girls' rules for Instagram. So I'm just going to kind of segue from all of that Facebook stuff to like, what can we do to take more personal responsibility in what we're seeing on Facebook, what we're seeing on Instagram, and make it not affect real world harm? So, and these teen girls, and like I said, with the other one, Mom 101, it's coolmomtech.com. If you go to coolmomtech.com, Liz has a really great article that she talked to her teen about what she can do to make Instagram a better place for her. And so this is the same kind of thing that Julie Jargon did. She said that yeah, so Ava is one of the teens in college I spoke, this is Julie Jargon, spoke with about their Instagram use. All have struggled with body image or mental health issues they say stemmed from the use of their app. They shared coping mechanisms and other tricks they have developed for protecting their well-being while still using the platform. Spoiler, one frequently mentioned tip is to quit Instagram, at least temporarily. So that's funny. So the first one is control what you see in your feed. So Akoma, 18 years old from Carlisle, Massachusetts. I had followed most people in my grade, even though I didn't interact with a lot of them. These interactions felt like they had a more heightened significance than they actually did. It was easier for me to focus on my life when other people's lives weren't taking up so much space in my head. So she's just saying, just control what you see. You don't need to follow everybody in your school because like you don't care what they are. I went to my 10-year high school reunion. I mean, I've had a 20-year high school reunion since then. But I went to my 10-year high school reunion, and when I left, and I loved seeing a bunch of my friends and everything like that because I went to high school in a different state than I live in now. But when I walked away, I was like, if I never knew anything more about some of these people, I wouldn't care. I mean, granted, there's definitely people from high school that I do still care about and I do want to know about their lives. But if I'm following everyone from my high school and I'm like, I really don't care what you're doing, we weren't that close in high school, then you don't need to be taking up space in my feed. So someone else who's 16 from Brooklyn, when I was 15, I was depressed and in a slump. I was tired of reading sad quotes on Instagram and watching depressing videos. And I came up with a strategy I called migration for your mental, where every time I was doing something negative, I would choose to migrate to something positive. At first, I said, okay, put the phone down. A few weeks later, I started unfollowing accounts. After that, I removed certain search terms from my Instagram search history. It came down to me writing down on a piece of paper what makes me feel good and what makes me feel bad. If it's on the bad list, it goes. My feed got a dramatic makeover. And then somebody else says, you can hide content from certain accounts so that the person doesn't know you're not seeing their posts. I've done that with a couple people. I do that with people all the time on Facebook. I unfollowed a bunch of celebrities and started only following people who spread good vibes. The content on your feed really does change your perspective. But I also step back and reflect on why I'm feeling bad about what someone has posted. I believe more girls should have those conversations with themselves and ask themselves why they're tying their self-confidence to something they see on social media. So good advice from these teens. Next piece of advice is turn off likes and turn away from explore. So turning off the like count takes away a lot of the worry that comes from Instagram. I can post what I want and not worry that people will judge me for not having a lot of likes. I used to think about when the best time to post was when most people would see it. When I turned off when I turned off likes, I focused on posting for me. And I love that about that. So, and then know when to take a break. This one's huge, I think. The summer before my senior year of high school, I was at a concert. I looked around and saw hundreds of phones in the air recording the show. People weren't even watching it, they were watching it on their screens. It dawned on me that people weren't living in the moment, they were documenting the moment for friends to see. The next morning, I deleted all social media apps. I told myself I would go without social media for as long as it felt good. Before I knew it, it had been 6 months. Um, and I'm not saying that you have to go that far. Like, so this one is a great one. A couple of years ago, I started putting a limit on Instagram through screen time settings on my phone. I limited myself to 30 minutes per day. Initially, I'd request more time, and that started to feel counterproductive. So I started sticking to my time limit and scrolling started to feel less important to me. So I think these are really good advice. When you're in the moment, be in the moment. If my daughter is serving in volleyball and I want to record her serving in volleyball, I'm missing the actual serve. I'm just watching it through a screen. And I came to that point because I used to like record almost all her serves, and she's got a really great volleyball serve. But I was missing the actual serve. I was only seeing it through a screen or when she's up to bat, because she plays softball. And I was missing these moments, but I was seeing them through the screen. And I put my phone away and I'm like, I want to just watch the serve and I want to watch her at bat. And I think that's a really important thing is to like when you're in these moments, put the phone down and be in the moment. And then, give yourself a time limit. I think that's a really important distinction as well. This one was a really funny one. Everyone overshares, try undersharing instead. So she says, I only post every 3 or 4 months. It makes it feel like more moments are personal and private now. I used to post something as simple as a beautiful granola bowl. Now I can just eat that granola bowl and no one needs to know about it. And what's funny is a lot of teens actually don't even have a lot of photos in their like main Instagram feed. They do a lot with stories because stories are just quick. They don't need to like feel like it has to be so curated and so perfected, as opposed to their actual Instagram feed. So they just do the interaction on stories. And so I think that helps them not feel so. Not feel the need to like perfect it because a story is just, I'm just talking on stories. So, or, I'm in the moment or I'm doing something. It's not this like highly curated photo. And another one was the one really big moment where I realized I had too much of myself tied up in Instagram account was after a high school dance. I felt I had this obligation to share photos to show that I had a fun time and I wore a pretty dress, but I was paralyzed by the fact that I hated all the pictures. I didn't end up posting a picture from that dance. And of course, the sky didn't fall. Crazy, right? Um, and then this is like kind of goes back to what I was just talking about, live more life offline. I decided to engage with people outside of Instagram. If I saw someone who posted something about a life event, I used that as an opportunity to text that person instead of just liking their post and scrolling by. And I do that as well. Like, so if I have a really good friend that it says their birthday on Facebook, I'll text them happy birthday instead of just posting happy birthday on their Facebook feed. So I think that, while that's still online, but I think it's a little more personal when I reach out in those ways. So um, Julie ends the article with some of the in-app tools. So again, these are some of the things that Facebook has implemented in Instagram to try and combat this. So to say that they're not doing anything, that they're only concerned about cost is kind of unfair. But so try some of these in-app tools. So a new tool called Limits allows people to hide comments and direct message requests from people who don't follow them. I have a reel about how to limit a message request. Or who recently started following them in an effort to prevent harassment or bullying. So somebody creates a fake account and tries to start bullying, your child or anything like that. Using limits will help combat that. A hidden words filter allows people to specify words or phrases or emojis they find offensive so they don't have to see those abusive comments or DM requests. And I actually implement that on my own platform. I get a lot of teens that are upset with the way I parent. And so they use foul language. And so I've set up hidden words in my comments so that those comments are automatically not shown and not seen, because I want my Instagram profile to be a family friendly place. So if somebody's scrolling through the comments, I don't want them to encounter foul language. So I have implemented that on my own Instagram account. So the hidden words filters can do, foul language. It can do all sorts of bullying language, whatever you want to write in there. Um, when people search for or post content related to eating disorders or body image issues, they'll see a pop up message with tips and ways to connect with the National Eating Disorders Association. So I think this is similar to those COVID notifications. If I post about COVID, it has a little link to official COVID resources. So it's really good at figuring those things out and kind of nudging you towards those resources. Um, so the company also announced it's pausing plans to develop a version of Instagram for kids. A full stop might be better. If teens find Instagram hard to handle, how will young children fare? And what I again think is unfair about that is we don't know how Instagram for kids would look. It can have a lot of the awesome restrictions that Messenger Kids has. So if I limit who can, the feed that my child can see, then it's going to be a lot better experience than regular Instagram for somebody who is younger. And it kind of helps, because right now a 10-year-old wants Instagram, and, parents like, oh, all your friends have Instagram. So they give in, which they should not, because the age limit is 13 for a reason. But if they give in, this would be a better tool to be able to give into, because this one would be more curated and more limited for that age group. So I am kind of bummed about the limits of this, whether or not they incorporate some good parental controls into the regular Instagram app. That would also be something I would love to see. But if they, if they're just going to put warnings, like they said with, hey, you've been on Instagram too long. Okay, well, stop judging me, Netflix. I'm going to keep going. I don't think that's going to do anything to help. So curious your thoughts. Definitely leave a comment. If you're not subscribed to me on YouTube or on Instagram, follow me on Instagram, subscribe to me on YouTube, so that that'll really help support me and support my channel. But we'll go ahead and end that there. But I'm dying to hear your comments about whether or not you would actually use a chronological feed, or what you think about Instagram Kids, what you think about all this whistleblower stuff. But those are my thoughts. So hopefully you gleaned a little bit of information for what is actually being said and what is kind of being reported. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. And thank you for joining me, and I will see you next Tuesday.